Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come to reconvene the general fund budget hearings for the county of Clackamas. Reminders that on the back table, there are handouts of the PowerPoint presentations that our various departments are showing us. And if you'd like to get those, for those of you watching online, I'm sure there are thousands that are doing that. Please go to the website where you can download any of the documents that the Budget Committee has been using and will be using as we continue through the budget process, having started yesterday and continuing through today, tomorrow, and a couple of days of next week. So thank you very much for that. A reminder for our presenters that the time we've allocated to you should be about 50% of your presentation and 50% left for questions. And as FYI, if you've been watching the proceedings, you know we have had a number of questions. This is a panel that wants to know a lot of information, so just be prepared for that. So I appreciate that. And with that, we will start with our first department, which is County Counsel. Mr. Madker.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the Budget Committee. My name is Stephen Madcore. I am your County Counsel. And the Office of County Counsel, which is located on the second floor of the PSB, provides a full range of comprehensive legal services to the Board of County Commissioners, to department directors, to divisions, and to the special districts. We provide general counsel and advisory legal work so that our county clients can effectively implement their policy objectives, achieve success for their operations, and minimize the risk for adverse results. The Office of County Counsel has 10 attorneys. We have 2 .75 legal assistants, and we have 1 office assistant. Behind me is, administrative assistant. Behind me is Mandy Gordon, who is the administrative assistant. She chairs our front desk, takes calls, does a variety of other tasks. We also have 4 attorneys there now. Amanda Keller, Kathleen Rastetter, Jeff Munns, and our newest addition, Andrew Naylor, who joins us from the Alaska Attorney General's office. He started 2 weeks ago. So welcome for all of you. Thank you. So it's a total FTE of 12.5 employees is what the office has. Legal work is divided among areas of specialty with leads, with backups, and assignments to various departments. As a result of the performance Clackamas process, we have what we will call created these different lines of business consistent with the direction of Performance Clackamas. And how we broke that down, one into county operations legal support, which is the advisory work. If somebody were to call up and say questions about this, can you review this contract? Can you review this IGA? That all falls into that particular line of business. We have 3.7 FTE is how we've apportioned that out. That takes up 26% of the practice area for county counsel. We also have a line of business of litigation and labor, which by far takes up the lion's share of FTEs, which is 6.75. Also takes up the lion's share of our work, which is 59%. And that includes litigation, all tort litigation. It includes labor negotiations. It includes employment litigation. So it is a wide swath of practice area for the office. The other line of business is the Office of County Counsel, which basically is advisory to the Board of Commissioners. It includes Mandy and myself primarily, public records responses, public meetings issues, various advisory type of tasks for myself and for a couple other attorneys in there on a case-by-case basis. We have it broken down into sub-areas as well, which is on the slide right there. Under county operations, it's advisory, transactional, regulatory. WES, that Amanda does lead on, is all part of county operations. If we're doing IGAs with Happy Valley, with Wilsonville, it's all under county operations. If we're doing land use, if we're doing real property exchanges and negotiations and transactions, all under that body of business right there. Again, litigation, everything from the sheriff's office to being sued by Happy Valley to being involved with litigation in LUBA, Court of Appeals, that's all under our chunk of litigation in the middle section there as well. We endeavor with that task to have a comprehensive legal boutique law firm to the entire county. We have 2,000 employees, we have 19 departments, we have department heads, agents, we have special districts, we have everything from West that was just formed into a 190. Our office spearheaded that entire transaction and integration, which was basically done by Amanda and Chris Story, a very complex, comprehensive integration of a variety of county functions. Our office did that to the price of $126 an hour, which is how we bill out if we do bill out to various clients within the county itself. A lot of work we do does not get billed directly. A lot of it is basically just a kind of a pass-through. A lot of the work I do for the Board of County Commissioners, Budget Committee presentations and things like that aren't billed. So those are things that are general funded. But we do have charges that go out to the risk fund. We have charges that go to West directly. We have charges that go to the development agency directly. We have charges that go to the clerk's office directly. And those are all going to be revenues on the screen that you see right here. A constant factor in any county operation, I'm sure you've heard it over the last few days, expenses are going up throughout, no fault of our own. It's cost, it's personnel, it's insurance, it's COLA, it's a variety of things like that. Our major cost drivers in my office, all personnel. Our technology cost, relatively static. Our office costs, we expanded a little bit because we got displaced from the fourth floor. Those are all kind of costs that we have no control over. Those are all fixed into the county operation. But in terms of internally, we're very strict with the public's dollars, and we're very modest with our budget requests. We try to make the most of technology. We try to make the most of computer resources and efficiencies to aid the office and to aid the county in keeping costs down, keeping the operation streamlined, keeping it at a best practices level without incurring some exceptional cost. Goals that we have for, well, back to the screen. General fund support, currently 66%, charge for services is 34%. There have been fluctuations with that. Some are going to be because we are billing less on some particular departments. For example, the development agency used to consume a lot of legal resources. With the toning down of urban renewal, those expenditures within our office have kind of flattened out and are no longer where they were beforehand. We do bill to DTD and we do bill to West and we do bill to risk again, but we do have, I don't want to say diminishing, but it's a fluctuating revenue stream based on the number of litigations, how active the cases are, whether they go to trial. If we're in trial, add another $100,000 to our revenues if we're involved in a one-week trial, most likely. But with that, there's a relative, we do bring in, we're not necessarily entirely general fund dependent. We do bring in outside resources that we have a relatively static level on, but it does fluctuate. As part of the whole performance clackamas aspect of things, which I had in the past expressed to this group and to others, how I have some challenge with integrating that entirely within the functions of the office. The functions of the office shouldn't be dictated by how many people you serve or how much you necessarily save. We strive to do as professional, as timely, as prompt, as competent legal work across the board, regardless of who's paying, regardless of what our time requirements are, regardless of who the client calling for our services is. So that being said, it's kind of difficult to pigeonhole a lot of the performance functions into our operations. We try. And with that, I can't say it necessarily has altered our behavior, has altered our practice, has altered our performance. We did incorporate measures such as the percent of contracts that are going to be received and reviewed and responded to within our office to a variety of clients within a timely basis. Of course, everybody would like to strive for 100% of having it done within 14 days, But let's say, for example, you get an ambulance services contract, you get a construction management general contractor contract. A lot of those are very complex, very involved, a lot of negotiation, give and take, back and forth. They're not going to be resolved within 14 days. We do have a variety of other contracts, IGAs, that are going to be done within the course of an hour and a half that day. But I don't want to say they're impossible for performance measures. They're objectives. They're aspirational. We strive to provide timely service to the client with or without performance clackamas is, I suppose, my point. So with that, we had the various objectives about contract turnaround. We also had, success with litigation. Quite frankly, if you talk to our litigators, they want to win them all, but the county necessarily shouldn't win them all. If the county has liability, the county will make fair resolutions and offers of settlement, enter into mediations, enter into settlement conferences. For example, if a sheriff's deputy rear-ends somebody or T-bones somebody through a marked intersection with no sirens on or lights, we admit liability. We're not going to waste taxpayer money on defending that thing. We will offer a reasonable amount of money. If the reasonable amount is not met, if it's not accepted, then we will likely be forced to litigate it until such time as we reach resolution with that. That said, we have a relatively high success rate with our cases. We litigate the meritorious cases, the ones in which the county did minimal damage and or had minimal risk associated with it. If it's a high risk, high exposure case, we will certainly apprise the board of it, apprise our risk manager of it, work closely with our internal partners in getting cases resolved in a manner that is best for the taxpayers of Clackamas County and being good stewards of taxpayer money as well. That said, we try to minimize risk to the county. We try to minimize exposure. If it requires early intervention, we do that. We are available at all different levels of client interaction. Sometimes, unfortunately, clients don't come to us until such time as it might be a little bit late. The contract's already breached. The damage has been done. We still try to minimize the dollar effect and the other consequences to the county itself. We do remain available in those regards, and it is our objective and always has been to resolve at the lowest level, to become involved at the lowest level, to minimize higher risk, higher exposure later on. The more litigation you're involved in, the more disruptive and costly to the county it is. You devote staff time, department staff time, to litigating a case when they should be doing the business of the county on their regular time. So there's a larger disruptive component of litigation countywide were to reach the level of cases, federal court cases, and things along those lines. We also have, again, one of our objectives was percentage of contested issues settled through regulations, IGAs, and other means, short of litigation or appeals. We try. We're not always successful. We try outreach with our variety of partners. Sometimes we get into disputes with other public entities. I assure this committee, and I know that the board knows, we try to avoid those public disputes. We are of the opinion that public disputes are unseemly and it's a waste of taxpayer dollars on both sides, and they should be resolved at the lowest time possible, earliest time possible, and the lowest denomination. But that's not always possible. But we do strive for those types of resolutions. The question was, do we have any key performances, and what has the process done? What has Performance Clackamas done? And our response is that it has neither added nor reduced programs or capacities as a result of implementing Performance Clackamas. We do now what we were doing then. We are still trying to capture a lot of the results, the statistics. Like I said, try to find creative ways of quantifying our work in accordance with Performance Clackamas. One of the comments last year from the Budget Committee was tracking employees leaving under all situations, terminations, voluntary departures, retirements, resignations, transfers, bumping rights, elimination of position, budget reasons, and seeing how many wind up at BOLI, how many wind up at federal court, how many wind up at state court, how many wind up at EEOC, how many wind up in grievances with the union. We're trying to do that. We're working collaboratively with HR. It requires the integration of 3 different data sources. We're the back end of it. The front end would be HR, and that's why we are working with Krista Weatherford and with Evelyn Minor-Lawrence. And hopefully within the course of the next year, we will have kind of cradle to grave tracking of those numbers, which will be informative and illustrative for everybody. But again, it requires extra time to track and to input and to monitor and to evaluate that type of data. So that's the one thing that we are trying to do as a result of Performance Clackamas and this body's direction. There's also the question of emerging issues, and some emerging issues are, ADA-based claims, ADA compliance. You might have read City of Portland had a settlement of the hundreds of thousands of dollars because they did not have ADA compliant sidewalks and accessibility. Our Department of Transportation and Development has a master improvement plan, which is meant to track implementation of curbs and ADA accessible areas throughout the entire county on county-owned and maintained roads. We have ADA issues at our jail. We have ADA issues at all public facilities. Imagine them at our courthouse. We have ADA issues at this facility as well. So that is a emerging, very high exposure area of law. We also have emerging issues in construction between the Pudding River Bridge, the Carver Bridge. Bell Avenue was a big improvement project. We have a courthouse on the horizon. We have the OSU building across the way. So we do have a need for construction design and construction related services within our office. Currently, what we are doing, we are contracting by way of an IGA with Multnomah County Attorney's Office, which has subject matter experts. We have contracted with them for HIPAA compliance. We hired probably one of the foremost HIPAA lawyers in the state in public sector work, and she aided us, and Kathleen was lead on that, and Don's office funded it with $76 an hour. We got her, Cindy Hahn, to aid the county in coming up with HIPAA compliant policies and implementation measures, which probably would have been $110,000 if you shepherded it out to the private sector. We also have somebody from Multnomah County who's aiding us in our software contracts, an area of expertise we don't have the bandwidth for right now, or even the full-time need. They do have a full-time person. We brought him on, again, $76 an hour, fully loaded, great value. And with construction, same type of thing. We have them on retainer for construction-related issues with some of our construction projects that have some delay cost damages with them, some design issues associated with them. So that is some of the ways that we've been trying to creatively and cost-effectively provide the level of service necessary to resolve these particular matters without hiring outside counsel at a cost of probably 5 times that amount, most likely, for those types of subject matter experts. Those would be things that we see in the future necessarily needing. We would probably need a construction lawyer. If we go into the courthouse, we would probably want somebody a year before that, year and a half before that, to track all the contracts, to track all the progress with that. We also will be needing some greater support staff for our litigation group. Right now we have 2 part-time legal assistants. We're either going to have those 2 job share and have 1 FTE open that we can do, or have them both elevate to full-time FTE to provide the level of support that our litigators need to effectively handle cases. What we also do is we have right now, we have a volunteer clerk from Lewis and Clark Law School. She's a first-year student there. We bring in at least 2 volunteer clerks a year, law clerks, to aid us with a variety of functions. They provide research support and a variety of other support for our lawyers. We also expose them to the value and the virtues of public sector work and hope that they are future public sector attorneys moving forward. So that is how we try to maximize the space we have and maximize the ability to deliver service at the lowest possible cost to the county itself. That concludes my presentation, and I am available to answer any question that the committee might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Medker. We appreciate that.
welcome.
We have Commissioner Bernard, then Mr. Magdalene, and then Commissioner Humberston.
So I just want to mention that how conservative he is, Stephen. Brought in used furniture from the warehouse. I mean, they went through and took pictures. And
The boneyard
the
is what we called it.
boneyard,
Yeah.
from the boneyard. But my question has to do with the Happy Valley lawsuit, which you mentioned, where the Department of Revenue sent us a letter saying that Happy Valley had gone through the wrong process and that they were still in the Parks District. The question is, do you track the hours on a case like the Happy Valley one? And is the lawsuit still proceeding as far as you know?
Two questions there, Chair. And yes, we do track. We track with Time Matters. It's our billing software and our case management software. That is all billable to the Parks District itself, with the exception of some of the work I do with advising you. I don't bill that to the Parks District. But yes, Jeff is lead on that, and he does bill and capture his time with that. And secondly, the case is still proceeding until further notification. I believe we're still waiting on something a bit more official from the Department of Revenue. The email, I think, is a precursor of what's to come, but I do think we'll need something a bit more official from them. But if it does come, we would ask that the case be either dismissed or held in abeyance until such time as it's resolved.
Is there also a possibility to bill them for our time?
We did include a claim for attorney's fees stating that the claim initiated by the city was lacking legal merit, and that is a basis in state law to seek fees in that regard. It's a tall order, seldom awarded, but you still have to plead it or else you would never be entitled to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Magdalene?
I have several questions. What's your mix of business change? In other words, take what you did, you gave us the nice, 3 3/4 FTE for operations, legal, et cetera. If we take that and go back 5 years, is there any change in that mix?
It would be, yes, there would be. Things do evolve in terms of the demands on the office itself. I would say that recently it's been construction. We had Carver Bridge litigation, we have Bell Avenue litigation. That's consumed a lot of resources devoted to that. A lot of employment claims too, from current employees, from former employees, and those are very time demanding and very disruptive within the workplace too. So employment law in general is a very, it's an emerging area of law. There's a lot of everything from ADA to FMLA to retaliation to whistleblowing. The body of law in that area keeps growing. So instead of having the typical case being out of the jail or off of the sheriff's patrol, it's now employees within the jail, employees on patrol, employees at other county departments. It's not reserved, it's not just unique to the sheriff's office, it's kind of across the board. But I would say, yes, those areas are kind of trending upwards. Employment litigation, construction litigation, HIPAA compliance, ADA compliance, those types of federal requirements. Those are all very demanding and onerous requirements on county governments, on city governments.
So is there a way, or I'm probably, I'll assume you've already gone through and tried to work with HR and going through the various stages of termination as an example.
In terms of reducing the risk to the county for employment-related terminations, we are very involved on the front end. We have an excellent working relationship with Evelyn Minor Lawrence, and with Eric Serha, and with everybody else at HR itself. We advise at the lowest level to make sure that if it's a, be it a severance package or transition or a discipline or progressive discipline, we provide the soundest advice that's going to aid the county in defending it if it were to become a case. And if the client sometimes wants to impose a discipline that our office believes is not warranted under the progressive discipline policies and practices, we will advise differently. We're not timid about doing that.
Okay. And then people coming to you early enough in the process?
I would say we have great improvements under my tenure here, yes. I think a lot of folks, as I presented to this board before, were reluctant to because they would be billed on an hourly basis to go see an attorney or to talk to an attorney. Now we have a bit more of a open policy with if it is really risk avoidance, you need to talk to us early, you need to talk to us often, and we have a good open door policy. We're very receptive to it, and it seems to have resonated with a lot of the county clients.
And is there anything that you need to do in your department to do to make you more productive?
Is that a rhetorical question?
Yeah. Well, but in the past, I think you wanted access to certain libraries and
I appreciate the question. I think we're good, and if we don't have access to it, we find creative ways to get it, such as when we contract with Multnomah for HIPAA or other expertise, we do outreach for it, and if we need resources, we'll find them. I do think if you were to ask my folks, they would say more support staff. They would say probably increased technology. Everybody has a take-home laptop or a touch screen or something like that. We have new software programs for discovery purposes. You get an employment case, they ask for all emails. You're going to get 30,000 emails. It's going to be this high. You have to organize it. It all goes to the cloud. It gets bait stamped. It's all very time-consuming. And that technology is expensive. We avail ourselves to it on a case-by-case basis. But if you were to give us another blankety blank for litigation support, it would be used. But right now, we're being very judicious in how we employ those resources.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Commissioner Hubbardston?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First, I'd like to say thank you for your accessibility. Questions on numerous occasions, and I've never not had you or one of your attorneys. I'll start again. I didn't have my microphone on. I was being waved at. I want to thank you for your accessibility. I've had to go to your office on a number of occasions to ask questions, and either you or one of your staff is always available to assist, and that's appreciated. I do have a couple of questions as a result of your presentation. One is, you indicated that these buildings in particular actually have some ADA issues, and I was kind of curious as to what they would be.
We've had, it came from HUD, and it took 3 years in the making, and they complained about the accessibility of the front entrances. They complained about the drag on the doors to open them, on the front doors, physically to open them, despite the button that you have there. And we do have the drag set there because if it doesn't have that, the wind's going to take it and drag it out. They didn't take into consideration alternative accesses around the building, like you can come up a different ramp. So there are 6% max grades you have to have for ADA compliance. And some of ours might differ from there, but we do have alternative accesses. And those are areas that the HUD folks weren't necessarily evaluating. They're evaluating it at specific access points. So we had to go back and identify that we were indeed compliant with that. But these things do change on a regular basis, and HUD or ADA compliant 12 years ago doesn't necessarily mean ADA compliant during this last, congressional session and whatnot.
So is there anything currently that you're aware of that we're not compliant in?
Nothing of great significance. Certainly these buildings, no, nothing in these buildings offhand.
Okay.
If you were to invite somebody from HUD here, I'm sure they could find something though. Yeah.
And I would assume if something were to be discovered, it would be shared with maintenance for
Absolutely.
appropriate remedies.
Those guys, Jeff and his crew are well-versed in it, all very costly improvements and retrofits. We're working with them on the jail right now to get most bang for our buck in terms of making that a bit more ADA compliant.
The only other question I have is, you indicate in your presentation that with our new construction, we would probably need an attorney to track the construction contract and design. And I was wondering, would that be full-time, part-time, or contracted out?
I would go either part-time or full-time. I would dissuade against contracting out because there's expertise that that person would be able to offer other county facilities moving forward. This county's growing. We're going to have a new jail on the horizon. We have the courthouse. There's other things. It would be probably part-time with a different body of work of contract review and maybe other advisory things, or it might be a slight litigation piece as well. Problem with contracting out is it costs a lot more. And we're very lucky to have our deal with Multnomah, but that's not going to be long-term. Their work level is going to increase where they won't have the bandwidth to give us what we're asking for,
So
most likely.
if I'm understanding you correctly, that would be another full-time attorney
Prop-
at
prop-
that point in time?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
And permanent employee?
I would say yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fisher, then Commissioner Schrader, then Commissioner Savas, please.
I really appreciate you going through and explaining the performance measure about litigation of employees. I'm a little bit concerned that it still says it's 50%. Last year, you would say, well, we don't really know if that's the number, and we're going to look at that number. And if we don't know if that's accurate, I'm thinking the budget document that we finalize, that we put out to the public says something as to this is an estimate in the process of determining the numbers.
You can certainly feel free to do so.
I mean, my basis of that, and I don't know, maybe you can tell me this. Across jurisdictions, what is the norm as to what terminations or separations from employment end up in litigation? 50% just seems high to me. Like, I have a hard time thinking that that's actually true.
I have not done a cross-jurisdictional analysis of how many employee separations result in litigation. Employment litigation is burgeoning, though. It is the hot area of law. There's high risk, high exposure, high dollars associated with it. It's just a reality.
So for the terminations, would it be too difficult to know how many terminations result in your active involvement? Or do you get involved with every termination where there's any form of grievance handling?
We do not get involved in every termination, no. We don't. And that's why it's hard to track these things, commissioners, because there are processes that are followed differently, whether you're at will, whether you're contract, whether you're non-rep, whether you're rep, whether you're AFSCME versus AE, EA. It goes differently whether you're within the sheriff's office. Everybody, we advise, but not on all of them. We can't force people to consult with us on advisory matters. And there's a whole body of data that's out there that it's not in our shop. I mean, we get it when somebody files a tort claim, or when somebody grieves, or when somebody files a BOLI complaint, or EEOC, or Title VII, or files a lawsuit. That's when it gets to us formally. Prior to that, you have the department and you have HR that are the gatekeepers and the custodians of that information. So that's why it's difficult for us to ascertain how many people got terminated and how many employment cases do we have. Moreover, they have up to 2 years to file a claim. So that is a continuing string of data collection and analysis, of which we really don't have the kind of the bandwidth or the horsepower to do that right now. Like I said, we're working with HR on incorporating 3 different data sources to get that, but it's a hard thing to track. Yeah.
I'm just looking at this as an indicator of things that we need to do better. If we need to do certain types of training, if there are certain types of lawsuits in employment, if we need to do, I don't know. I don't know if they're related to sexual harassment, if it's related to uncomfortable work environment, if it's related to lack of accommodations. But if we need to direct, as the county commissioner or the budget committee, our county administrator to look at how can we prevent these, to provide more education or training for our managers, supervisors.
Well, I will say that you just had Don sent out the mandatory training on sexual harassment and other harassment. Our sexual harassment, I'm not aware, quite frankly, of a sexual harassment case being filed against Clackamas County in the last 7 years. There might have been one, I'm not aware of it. We do have retaliation, we do have whistleblowing, both are the same thing. We have an enhanced employee complaint process that was in the midst of being rolled out, which includes our ethics point, our confidential anonymous reporting system, and we also have a system that will go to the direct supervisor, that goes to that supervisor, that goes to county administration. So there are a variety, that goes to the union representative as well. So there's a whole variety of enhanced low-level complaint resolution functions that we're rolling out because people have said that I can't complain to my supervisor because he or she retaliates against me. And instead of going all the way over and right to Don, we have a hierarchy of sorts, which is meant to address it at a lower level. So those are all kind of access points that are being developed and rolled out in that regard. But there are cases, if an employee doesn't function to the level of the supervisor's requirements and the county's requirements for that matter, and is either disciplined or given a performance plan that they don't like or terminated, they oftentimes, with a creative lawyer, will come up with something and say it was age, it was race, it was gender, it was handicap, it was because I filed a claim, it was because I had a workers' comp claim, it was a variety of reasons. They have an abundance of claims available to them. I took FML. We have a case right now where the person wasn't even terminated and they're suing us for termination, literally. And that is when he had requested a medical leave, which was granted, and then we got sued. So
That's frustrating.
it is. So
And you
there
can't
are.
control that.
Yeah, we can't. There's a lot of things that we can't control, precisely.
Yeah, well, if there are things that we can do better, as the policymakers, we don't have a way to know what the issues are unless we hear from you and from the staff, because people that I talk to that work for the county, they love it. They like their supervisors. If they have an issue, they are able to address it. I just hear positive things. I don't hear the hard stuff, so.
So if I may,
Krepp, yes.
just simply follow up and respond. I don't know that the universe of involuntary terminations is so large that we couldn't at some point in the future find an opportunity to talk about the nature of the issues with the commissioners and kind of let you know what we encounter when we encounter them. So I think probably the area when you get a chance to hear from Evelyn, that is kind of a more significant draw on time and energy in the Human Resources Department and also in County Council is when we receive complaints, formal complaints that require some form of investigation and follow-up. That's an area that is consuming a considerable amount of time and energy on the part of our Human Resources staff and to some extent our County Council staff. But we can follow up.
That's good. I appreciate that. My last question, I know we are hiring outside counsel to deal with some of the sheriff lawsuits. Are those in your budget or do those get allocated out to the sheriff? I'm assuming they charge more than $126 an hour for outside counsel. So I'm just curious where those costs are in the budget.
Those costs are going to the risk fund on this particular case. We did hire outside counsel for a recent case, relatively high-profile case, because we needed to hire outside counsel, and it was approved by the board. But that one is more expensive. I can't recall his rate. It might be $275, and it will be expensive. It already has been, and it will be billed to the risk fund. I presume we'd have to talk to Eric about it. It might result in a higher assessment or allocation to the sheriff's office next year or next budget cycle, whenever that's reallocated. But typically, outside counsel is paid by the risk fund. If it's not risk-related, then county admin and my office find ways in which to fund it. We have had situations like that in the past where it's not a risk case, so you can't bill it to the fund. But those are few and far between.
And your budget has enough flexibility?
No,
No?
I think we got 10 grand in there.
So then you just go to Dawn. The process is if that comes up, you talk to Dawn. They
Correct. Like I said, it's
We do
very infrequent, and we might have to do a modification on it, an adjustment, but it's very infrequent when we have had to do it. And if we do it, it's not going to be for typically litigation. It might be for outside advisory work, which is going to be less typically than what this case is going to cost.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, back in 2010, one of my bills in the legislature was a whistleblower bill, actually because of an issue that happened here in Clackamas County for Water and Environment Services. What are the options for our employees if they are feeling as if they're threatened for pointing things out to us? Do they go to you directly? Do they get outside counsel? Do they have opportunities to make sure that there is no retaliation?
Those are excellent questions, Commissioner Schrader, and it kind of dovetails with what I was responding to with Commissioner Fisher, in that the avenues available to employees who believe that there are issues that require either disclosure and/or are pointing out retaliation as a result of that disclosure are, in my estimation, numerous. There is the Ethics Point software program,
Okay.
which is available to all county employees, and it's Brian Nava, the auditor, and Sherry Anderson, our treasurer. They are the caretakers of that, so it's removed from county council, it's removed from county administration. And those are independently evaluated and investigated. An employee could make a claim through there. Also, it could go up, if they're represented, it could go up through their union representative as well. It could go up to their direct supervisor. It could leapfrog the direct supervisor to the department head. And I know that Don and Laurel and Emmett have been receptive and available to receiving complaints in that regard as well. In order to prohibit retaliation, that's the more touchy point, because the reporting mechanism, it's widespread. You can report it. You could do anonymous notes, as we've seen. You could do it with your name on it. But the retaliation aspect of it is we have to advise and admonish and caution the department, thou shalt have no retaliation because of this legitimate complaint. We have limited authority at that point. We can advise. People often don't follow the advice. Sometimes you make the advice, you can't do A, B, C, D, and E, and they don't invite the person for lunch, and it's viewed as retaliation. So it depends on the case-by-case basis, but the way to prohibit the retaliatory aspect is to advise and caution against it.
So my question is this: I understand the union piece because there is an infrastructure for that. What if there are issues with a non-representative employee with a union? How does that differ in terms of legal protection and how folks are treated?
I think the legal protection is identical whether you're in the union or not. Your grievance process might be a little bit different, but your entitlement to be free from retaliation for making a legitimate complaint about public concern remains the same. And whether you're in the highest reaches of county admin or in the office of county counsel or in the treasurer's office or the assessor's office, if you make a complaint and there's retaliation against you, perceived retaliation against you, there are potentially legal protections afforded all of those employees, regardless of their hierarchy within the county at all, whether it's the road crew or county admin.
Okay, thank
Does that
you.
answer your question?
It does, and the bill did actually expand. The whole point was to expand protection, not only for employees, but for other public servants as well. And I just wanted to make sure that we are fully implementing it here in this milieu. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Savas, any final questions or comments? Thank you so much.
So, Stephen, I mean, you earlier were speaking about the construction aspect or maybe a need for counsel with that expertise, and I just wanted to point out that from a housing standpoint, if we indeed are have a bond, housing bond passed in the near future, and our aspects of building, I think that I see perhaps an expanded need for that as well. So not just some of our current structures, but what we may be building we could have a genuine full-time need. Hard to say. But I also want to just, if that does come about, I guess there's a lot of contractual things that are not necessarily in the nature of construction, and BOLI and all the other aspects, how that all interplay, as just as well as the actual hands-on type of things with product guarantees and so forth. And so I know that's probably a big world, and my guess is that there's probably specialties within that whole category, right? And this nature of the beast, I know in my world it was the same way. There were expertise and divisions amongst that in that arena of law or field of industry. So how broad is that? Is there that many divisions of it?
It can be quite complex, but you've nailed it. You have prevailing wage issues, you have materials, you have construction design, you have means and methods, you have general contractor, project manager contracts, which are, 150, 200 pages long. And you're dealing with some, large corporations. There's high risk, high exposure issues. And there's a lot of issues that, if our courthouse, for example, we will need a full-time lawyer on that, guaranteed. You're going to have design issues. You're going to have construction delay claims. You delay a contractor a day, it adds up very quickly. So it's going to be well worth it to have a lawyer on the front end. And it won't be just a lawyer. You'll have procurement intimately involved. You'll have facilities intimately involved in that thing. Right now, we're kind of spreading that area among 3 attorneys in the office in terms of doing the contract review and negotiation in those areas. But with larger projects, be it jail, courthouse, yeah, we'll need somebody full-time for that. And it is very complex, as you pointed out.
Yeah, my last comment is that in your world, I think you're more reactionary, right? You're responding to things, and some of the things I think come under as far as preventive, come under the administrator's position and role, and how to be preventive as best as possible. But I would say that, my observation and experience is it's a very dynamic situation. Things aren't static, and things change. And now with social media and case law and all the things that are happening, new doors always open, and your world's always adjusting, or our world's always adjusting to those changes and challenges.
If I did not state this, I would repeat, or I would offer one of my statements. County Counsel endeavors to be proactive in our work by anticipating client needs and providing timely, sound, and appropriate legal advice before issues become liabilities. So there are situations where we can't be anything but reactive because we weren't involved at the front end, but I do think that the office as a whole is proactive and does a lot of outreach in trying to get all Clark County departments to seek out and obtain legal services before they're actually needed.
If I may, for example, the work that County Counsel has been doing with regard to HIPAA and ADA and the work on sort of employment matters and those sorts of things, a great deal of that work from County Counsel is intended to be preventative and anticipatory to help us prevent a situation from emerging. So, yeah.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Did you have a comment, sir? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Madker.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your attendance. It is now time to hear about transportation and development. I'm going to invite the director, Dan Johnson, and then you can introduce your other folks. Dan?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
just before Dan gets up, I just want to make a point of transparency. I'm the chair of the Clackamas Dogs Foundation, and as such, we work very closely with DTD and Clackamas County Dog Services. It is not a conflict of interest. I make no money. It costs me money.
Right.
As do the 3 dogs that I adopted from there. 2 of them have incurred vet bills of over $4,800.
If they're doing
each,
okay,
so-
well, you're in good shape, right? Thank you very much for that,
I
Mr.
would-
Feely. I
Talk
appreciate
to our
that.
lawyers and see about
I know.
compensation.
Yeah, there you go. So just a reminder that presentations are on the back table if anyone here wants them. And for those of you listening online, those thousands of people, they are available on the website. Also, we have an hour and a half for this presentation, and I think there's general awareness that about half that time should be spent on presentation and half that time on Q&A. So, thank you, Mr.
Or
Johnson.
hopefully 35 minutes, and then we can talk as long as you like.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Chair
And I'll
Parks.
I'll leave it to you to introduce the folks at the table
Great,
with you.
thank you so much. Chair Parks, rest of the Budget Committee, my name is Dan Johnson. I'm the Director of the Transportation and Development Department. I am joined to my left by Deidre Landon, our Administrative Services Manager, and to my right by Mike Besner, who is our Assistant Director for Transportation. And we are here to share, we are pleased to be here today to share with you the budget for the Department of Transportation and Development for Clackamas County. Oh, I got other duties as assigned. Let's see here. So this is our mission. You can see it, you can read it. A couple things that I want to draw your attention to that are important to us are kind of three words within that, one of which is provide. You will see that we provide a very wide range of services from that mission statement. You will also see the word to. We have a clarity about who we provide those services to. And it's important to understand the fact that we provide those services not only to individuals and citizens within Clackamas County, but also folks that may be traveling to and through Clackamas County, which is important to us as well. Last but not least, you'll see the word so in there. These are aspirational goals not only for our current but future generations so they can experience a healthy, safe, and livable community. DTD, who are we? What do we do? These are essentially, it's our organizational chart, our programmatic chart. We have 4 unique lines of business that you will see at the top of that slide. Within each, or under 3 of those, you will see a very diverse list of programs that we operate. Some of them are more inclusive than others, but all of them have a very specific purpose. I would like to mention also, not included on this slide are 2 areas that fall under our line of business called targeted improvement areas. That includes work from our lighting district and work from the development agency, who is the Urban Renewal Authority for Clackamas County. They're presenting next week, next week's budget hearing, but essentially that gives you a kind of a full scope of what our suite of services are within DTD. So, departmental budget request and trends. You can see just briefly. You've seen this slide before. Some folks have altered this slide a little bit, pulled out ending fund balances, carryovers, contingency reserve. We made a conscious decision to kind of keep it holistic and in one slide. And let's talk about these numbers just briefly. First and foremost, you can see the general fund number there on the bottom, the roughly $5 million that floats through the budget cycles that are there from 16-17 actuals to our 17-18 and 18-19 numbers. It's pretty constant. I will bring to your attention there is a reduction you will see from the 17-18 to the 18-19. The majority of that is essentially the dialogue around the $500,000 policy level decision regarding assistance, general fund assistance for paving, which we're prepared to talk about and have some discussion about here in future slides. I also want to talk about, the revenues that you see. There isn't a lot of fluctuation in that. You see like a 3% decrease from 16-17 and a 4% increase from 17-18, but they're pretty stagnant and pretty consistent from what we're seeing today. I am going to turn it over to Deidre just briefly, though, to talk to you briefly about our expenditures and the actuals that you see up there for 16-17.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to briefly go over why you might see a big discrepancy between the revenues and expenditures as they are shown there. Transportation and development, the revenues of about $113 million include a pretty hefty beginning fund balance for a number of our funds. We carry a fair amount of dedicated funds within our department. So of that $113 million, we had a $40 million beginning fund balance that particular year, of which $36 million, was dedicated funding in our different specific funds, and that includes anything from building codes, public land corner, our system development charges, which is really project-specific funding that has to go to a list of projects that might be built, our road fund, as well as grant revenues we may have received for specific capital projects. And so we do carry a beginning fund balance each year because of all of those funds, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the future, because when you then also look at the expenses for the 16-17, what you don't see there is what we had budgeted for our reserves and contingency that particular year. And we had budgeted about a $30 million reserve in contingency. And obviously that comes off once you're looking at actuals because that doesn't carry forward. But that year, our expenses were a little bit lower than we had anticipated, and that happened for a few reasons, and I'll highlight three pretty big ones that happened that particular year. So we had about a $3 million, I'll say savings, but what really happens is in our personal services category, when we're preparing our budget, we lay out all the positions that we hope to have filled within a given budget year. We recognized about a $3 million, I'll say, savings because it was due to vacancies that we weren't able to fill throughout the year. And that's not going to be one single vacancy. Our staffing fluctuates throughout the department regularly. You might have an internal staff person apply for an open position that then leaves another vacancy that you're going to fill. So it's always fluctuating when you have the FTE count that we do. And I'm going to let Dan talk about that at the next slide. Also that year, we had a robust paving package that we planned on finishing that particular summer. What happens a lot in transportation projects is that our fiscal year falls squarely over our construction season. And so we're doing our best to balance how much of a contract might be spent before the end of a fiscal year versus at the beginning of the next fiscal year. And that can be pretty challenging in order to make sure that you have the budget authority that you need to complete your projects and make sure you don't get yourself in hot water. So we had a $6 million paving package that moved forward into the next year, the 17-18 budget year. So that's another reason those expenses were a little lower. And then also just our capital projects. We have a pretty robust capital projects group. And again, you need to make sure you have the authority to spend what you're going to spend. So we ended up about $10 million lower on that particular year because we had some large projects. We had Sunrise, Tolbert, a number of high dollar projects that we needed to make sure we could spend the money if the contractor invoices came through. So that's essentially what happened that particular year. This is mine too.
There it is. Congratulations.
Welcome back. Okay. So on this one, I wanted to just touch on some of our major categories, let you know what really gets rolled into those revenues and expense categories. So for our upcoming budget, our revenues, I'm just going to highlight the top two, and I'm leaving fund balance and reserves and contingency out of the conversation for just a moment, and I'll come back to that. The state revenues that you'll see there, it makes up 32% of our total revenues, includes our motor vehicle fund. It also includes the revenues we're anticipating from the new House Bill 2017. In addition to that, we get a number of state grants to help our transportation capital projects, and that's included in that category as well. The next largest revenue category is our licenses and permitting. And this is, a bulk of it is made up by our development-related permits, and that could be county surveyor, building codes, land use planning, you name it. We have a number of different permit fees that we capture, but also captured in that licensing and permit category are our dog licenses, and that's a pretty hefty figure as well. So that's why those are the standout categories for our revenues. The expenses, personal services in transportation and development will always be a large category. When you're talking development services, you need a good staff load to provide the services, perform the inspections, plan reviews, issue the permits, and do those reviews. In addition to that, we have our transportation maintenance group, which is out there constantly performing work along the roads to make sure it's safe for travelers. And Dan will talk a little bit about the FTE trending on the next slide, so I'll skip that for now. But what gets a little interesting is our capital and our materials and services expense categories. So when you look at capital, you might initially think that that's going to include everything. And it does, it includes a lot. But the way materials and services, our contract paving is not actually considered a capital outlay because what we're doing is we are maintaining an existing infrastructure and asset that we have. So you're going to see our contract paving, as well as all of the supplies and materials for our transportation maintenance function, falls under that materials and services category. So it ends up, bulking up that category a little bit more than you might see in other groups. And then the capital outlay, it is large. It includes our transportation capital projects. So that's always a pretty large expense each year. It has any of our light vehicles throughout the whole department that might be replaced in a given year, heavy equipment for our transportation maintenance group, as well as an electronic plan review initiative that our department's hoping to kick off this year, and we'll talk about that in a future slide, so I'll just leave that earmark there. And then you'll also see just in the beginning fund balance and the reserves and contingency, again, what you'll see is all those dedicated funds I mentioned earlier. You've got the building codes, public land corner, system development charges, roads, capital projects, but it also carries a buffer for us for our program initiatives. And that is stuff like our electronic plan review initiative that we'll talk about. We made some decisions to hire a vet down at Dog Services recently, and I think Mike might talk about that a little bit. But it also obviously carries our operating reserve and contingency for those programs to sustain operations in future years.
So let's talk FTEs. Just briefly, kind of here are the numbers. There is a net increase, basically 273.4 to 282.1. I'm not sure who the 0.1 is. That's kind of an awkward number. We're going to look for that person.
It'd probably be hard to find.
Really, really small.
Yeah, small, then look under all the.
Yeah, under the desks. Just real quick, just some thoughts. You know, we're in all honesty, we are seeing a seismic shift with our FTEs at DTD. I've been here 25 years, and we have never had a shift. It's mostly from retirements, with this infusion of newer employees in our organization. 17, 18. We were tracking about 20% of our total workforce has been here for 2 years or less, which is interesting when you talk about the loss of the institutional knowledge. With the hires that we're going to have next year, we're probably trending more towards about 22% of the totality of our workforce. What does that mean? You know, obviously that means, well, and one more interesting topic along those lines, 63% of our department staff is eligible for retirement in 5 years. So what does that mean?
63.
63%. So what does that mean? That means that we have a continued focus on succession planning. How do we stabilize data and information within our organization to make sure that those that come into the organization have access to that data? How do we make sure that we have all our levels, from our lower levels to middle management to upper management, prepared and moving forward through some sort of reasoned succession plan and effort? I also, just for your sake of discussion, you can see the transportation elements up there have the largest jump. The rest of those are basically reallocation of dollars and distribution of costs. Transportation increases due to the House Bill 2017 money coming in. We have got to have folks queued up to get that money on the roads, and that is our concern, is to make sure that we have folks who can deliver the projects. The state has gone through with that that funding project and process, and so we are concerned about making sure those dollars hit the roads and people can see it. Hey, trends about our FTEs. We looked at our FTE counts. It's apparent there are a couple things that have been affected. We looked all the way back to 2000. You know, 2000 we were at our highest, we were about 318. 2015 we were at our lowest, about 228. There are a couple of primary things that have been impacting that, one of which is loss of some transportation maintenance funding. This is the timber receipt money. Had a pretty drastic impact on some of our employment numbers down in transportation maintenance. And you also see development trends. There are two seismic shifts down that occurred, one in 2000, one in 2009, that had a significant impact on our FTE count. But that economic recovery is also replacing, you'll see in that trending going back up now, and you're also seeing with the new additional funding for HB 2017 that our transportation employment numbers are going up as well. I do want to inform you that we are slow to respond. We want to make sure, obviously, that this economic recovery is going to be continued, so we are strategic in those hires where we can be. Next, I'm going to quickly go over this. This is a snapshot of how our dollars are kind of distributed throughout our various lines of business, and we're going to speak more holistically to this topic when we get into the lines of business slides. I do want to emphasize some of the good work that DADRA did over the last year, and it relates to our strategic plan. We actually were one of the first divisions within the county to go through this managing for results and responding to this performance clackamas. And we did that like 3 to 4 years ago. I have scars from meetings in rooms and Post-it notes on walls, and holy smokes, 48 hours in a conference room. But one of the things that we use this document, we consider this document to be a living document. It needs to change. It changes with what issues we're facing on a particular topic or a particular year within our organization. Deidre did some amazing work last year to basically freshen up that document. We freshened up that document, and as a part of that effort, actually made it more inclusive. Our first draft was mostly management, some staff. We actually made an effort to get the majority of our staff involved in understanding what MFR is, how does it work, how does it message for the work that we're doing, and development of some of these goals. We had over 80% of our staff attend those meetings, which was great. And the reason I share that with you is you're going to see some performance measures in these upcoming slides that say new. And they're new for a reason, because we just thought about that these are creative ways and more descriptive ways to describe our work. So with that, let's dive into this. So DTD administration comprises about 2% of DTD's budget. Right now, it's about $2.2 million. It has 0 general fund dollars. You can see from that purpose statement, we are here to provide leadership, supervision, financial, communication, and emergency support services. And we do this every day. We have measures in this department, but some of the things that I thought I would throw up here are basically items that fall directly on our shoulders to ensure the work at DTD and our employees are getting done, one of which is customer service. We continue to find creative ways to not only serve our customers better, we're going to speak about some of those today, but also have discussions about how we measure and engage with them about the service we are providing. It's one of the biggest takeaways from MFR that we've seen to date is actually a meaningful discussion with our customers on how they perceive our service. You want to move up, Dan? You want to sit here and talk? Okay.
I need glasses.
Hey, you got to speak open and honestly about violence in the workplace. We are a public-facing agency. You'll see in our numbers, and they are staggering. We are running 300,000 development-related interactions a year alone. That doesn't count all the work our transportation maintenance folks are doing out on the roads. It is the world we live in. It is a topic that we have to discuss to ensure not only that we're providing a safe environment for our employees, but also a safe environment for those that may be joining us from the public. So we have been taking that on and having great work with Dawn and others through risk management and to advance that dialogue countywide as well, which has been great. Hey, we're in the disaster business too. Congratulations, you are looking at the debris manager for Clackamas County, which may concern a lot of you. But we are working close with emergency management to develop the debris master plan. Essentially, this plan is a plan that we have to put in place to ensure that we have the financial viability to get to recoup funds from FEMA. It is an exhausting effort. We are about done. It is a living document as well. Nothing's perfect, but that falls on our shoulders to get that work done. Last but not least, we've been doing some great work through Mike's group and transportation long-range planning. Steve Williams, Title VI. Title VI is near and dear to our hearts, and it's something we have to ensure that we are meeting. We've developed a plan for that, which has been in place. And basically that Title VI dialogue revolves around ensuring equitable projects and programmatic outreach, which we are taking very seriously. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn this over to Mike Besner and let him expand on a couple more of our programs.
Thanks, Dan. All right.
Sounds like a television program. Thanks, Dan.
Let me get my TV voice going. So the Livable Communities line of business, it includes, if you don't recall from the earlier slide, sustainability and solid waste, code enforcement, and dog services. Bit of a potpourri. It's 7% of DTD's total budget, which is about $7.7 million. And $1.8 million of that is general fund. The majority of that goes to dog services. A couple measures wanted to point out, I'm not going to go over all of them, but the number of violations confirmed within 7 business days, and that's code enforcement. Basically, as you probably know or might know, we're a complaint-driven program. So we get the complaint, the first thing we have to do is confirm, is this real? Because not all of them are. Or is it an actual potential violation? And so our goal here is 85% of those complaints will have confirmed whether it needs to be an investigation within 7 business days. And there's a lot of ways we do that. Sometimes it is a site visit, sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes frankly it's an internet search or an RMLS search or something like that. The other one I want to point out here is for dog services, fewer than 6% of adopted dogs return to dog services within 90 days, or turning that to a positive, at least 94% of dogs we adopt out are not returned. And we're very proud of that. That is the number we're about hitting right now. And it's a commitment on our part, one, to match people to dogs that fit their lifestyle and their families and their life situations. It's also, frankly, we're a little careful. We're not going to adopt a dog out that is a threat to public safety. And we find that many of our returns, the dog bit the owner within a week and they return the dog. So we don't like that and we try and avoid it. And so those are, that's a new measure we put in and we're proud of that one. So a few things going on in the line of business that I'll point out. Sustainability and solid waste. They want to do a pilot program coming up about a food donation pilot project, and it's really fascinating. They want to, so reducing food waste is one of the most important cost-effective ways to reduce our carbon footprint. And it addresses hunger, which is, as you all know, a significant problem still in Oregon. And Oregon Food Bank does work on this, but they do large work. They take large donations, and nobody really right now is taking the smaller donations. And in Clackamas County, there's a lot of opportunity to do that. We can get them from restaurants and schools, food distributors, convenience stores, grocery stores, and we can get them to local food pantries, including some that are actually already based in schools. So we actually envision a role where we could be providing this service and fill the gap that Oregon Food Bank is not currently serving. So we're hoping to get
Farmers markets.
and farmers markets.
Yes. Good point.
Another thing that's been a change in code enforcement is past due collections. Believe it or not, when we find people, they don't always pay. It's amazing. And in the past, they usually would just, we don't erase the debt, but we didn't have much of a mechanism to get the money. Well, now we're active in it. We have a collection agency. Incidentally, we've been doing it in dogs for a while, but now dogs and code enforcement are using the same collection agency, and it's proving to be effective. The amount collected already has been a couple $100,000, and so that helps support the program. In dog services, the licensing campaign that we're kicking out, Tag You're It. It's got a little cartoon dog, very cute. And beefing up our online licensing. After general fund, licensing revenue is our biggest source of funding for dog services, and we believe we can do better. We don't know exactly what the compliance is. It's low. Nationwide, generally 30%, 20% are nationwide statistics. So if we could bump that up even a little bit, it gives the dog shelter a lot more resources, so that we're able to keep doing the things we're doing and maybe even expand the things we're doing. The other thing I want to point out, and Tom did mention he's on the board of the foundation, but the foundation is helping fund our new foster program that we're getting going. That program is so that, we have some dogs that just don't shelter very well in the dog shelter, but otherwise they're very adoptable dogs. They just don't do well in a cage. And so some do, some don't. And so if we can get them in the house of a local foster family or individual, and they can work with the dog until we can find a place to adopt them out, it can help make that dog or keep that dog adoptable. So we're proud of that partnership. Okay, transportation. Transportation includes engineering and construction, it includes maintenance, it includes traffic safety, it includes SDCs, and it includes our Damascus Roads program as well. It's 69% of the county's, or of DTD's, total budget. It's about $79 million. Of that, only $270,000 is general fund. And that all is actually for the Drive to Zero program, which is in traffic safety. A couple of performance measures I want to point out. Number of projects managed. This group puts out a prolific amount of work. Generally, we're managing anywhere between 25 and 35 projects a year. Some are small and people don't even realize they happen. Some are quite large and very public. This coming year, we're forecasted to manage 34 projects. The number is growing with increases in funding, and we've done well getting some grants lately also. The other one I want to specifically point out is under traffic safety. The number of community engagement interactions related to traffic safety is about 2,600. A lot of that is high school kids and middle school kids where we actually go to the schools and facilitate or do presentations and assemblies. I've attended them before. They're pretty amazing. There's a guy from Vancouver we actually pay to bring down, named Kevin Brooks, who does a fantastic drunk driving presentation for high school kids, and I've never seen him do anything but get standing ovations afterwards. It includes social media posts and press releases as well. It's a very active program. And the face of that's been Patty McMillan. She's retired. We actually have just hired a replacement, so looking forward to everybody getting to know the new person who's going to lead that program.
Okay.
So, what's going on in the world of transportation? Well, a few things. I'm going to get technical on you for a second. So, PQI to PCI transition. I am an engineer, so I have to do it once. We have changed the way that we rate our pavements. We used to use something called a pavement quality index, and we were one of the only ones in the state of Oregon using that. So it was kind of hard to compare us to other people. PCI is pavement condition index, and it's used by virtually every public agency in Oregon that does any kind of pavement management, which is most. So we've changed. We have a new system, and we're working on reevaluating our roads. We've done it once last year. We evaluated all of them. We have one data point. It's not a heck of a lot, but we got a number out of it. Now we're going to do it again this year and get 2 data points, which will help us understand our PCI and how it's trending. If you're not familiar with it, in general, 70 or over is pretty darn good. 40 or below, you don't want to probably drive on that road. It's going to have a lot of potholes, and it's a visual survey of the road only. So that work is ongoing. House Bill 2017 was a pretty mammoth undertaking. Thank you, state legislature. It's supplying all public agencies in the state with a lot more transportation funding. Just to tell you what it has done and what it's going to do, we've already had a 4-cent gas tax increase. That was done on January 1st. We've also already had a $13 vehicle registration fee increase. That's already happened. The gas tax increases, there's 3 more in the law to come. In 2020, 2022, and 2024, each of those years are scheduled another 2-cent increase for a total of 6 more cents. The gas tax increase is contingent on ODOT doing a few things. One is they already did. No later than February 1st of this year, they had to report to the legislature on the cost to complete the I-205 project. They've already done that and gave a presentation down in Salem. And then the few other things they have to do before December 1st, 2019, one of which is they have to go back and report on another new status on the I-205 project and basically say what their plan is to get it done. And I know conversations are very active in that arena right now. The other one is they actually have, this is a little confusing in the bill, they have to complete the I-205 active traffic management project and the I-205 corridor bottleneck project. Neither of those are in Clackamas County. They are both in Multnomah County, and actually the projects are underway right now, and they're basically adding auxiliary lanes to the highway up there. So I'm confident ODOT will finish their part. The other part of it is every single county and city has to report on our pavement condition every 2 years, and so we are all over each other to get that done. It's going to happen. The vehicle registration fee is also going to increase, again, based on the mileage of the efficiency of the vehicle, actually. So the more fuel efficient your vehicle is, the more you're going to pay in registration fee to make up for the gas tax you're not paying. The bulk of that is electric vehicles. Their fee is going to go up by $115 a year. And those are stepping in also in 2020 and 22. Further increases, but those are not contingent on anything. They are in the law, and there's nothing to stop them from happening. As a result of the House bill money also, and Dan already mentioned it, we've talked to Don and County Admin about the $500,000 policy level proposal that the Budget Committee in the past was generous enough to provide to DTD to fund work that was historically funded by road fund, and instead we took that road fund and put it towards paving in years where we we were struggling to have paving packages. We're not really struggling anymore to have paving packages. So we talked about, well, we appreciate the stopgap, and we basically offered it back if it was desired for other things. And so it's not in our budget. The last thing, asset management program implementation. This is actually something that in the last federal highway bill was required of all state DOTs, that they develop pretty robust asset management programs. We've always had one here, but it's been more like niche programs, and it hasn't ever been holistic in the whole line of business. And so we're changing that. We're about to complete a strategic plan to implement a transportation asset management plan, and we're very excited about it. It's going to link all of our programs together, all of our assets. We'll be able to manage our signal poles, our paving, our bridges, our striping, our signs, all of it using an asset management strategic approach. And it's been a terrific process, and we're excited to continue it. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Dan.
We lied. It's going to go a little bit longer than 30 minutes. My apologies. Hey, briefly, I get the pleasure of speaking to you about our land use and permitting line of business. Comprises approximately 22% of DTD's budget, roughly $25.7 million. Of that, there's $3.44 million in there of general fund. There are a variety of measures in regards to this program. There are three that I want to draw your attention to, one of which is the first three, more specifically, percentage of people surveyed who are happy with the level of customer service. Percentages are great, but they're useless if you don't have a good snapshot of your clientele. And we are pleased to present and inform you of the fact that that's something we've been working on. Historically, we would have few folks that would respond. Right now, we're trending towards, in 16-17, we had about 3,500 individuals respond to that survey. Right now, in the third quarter of 17-18, we're trending over 3,000. So we're hoping to hit almost 4,000 individuals that we work with actually responding to that survey information. Secondly, there's two new measures on there. One is the dollar value of constructed improvements. One of the things that we're trying to message is the fact that this is a personal services heavy department. And so what's the output? What's the economic benefit of the work they are doing? And what we are looking to measure now is basically that value of those improvements they are pushing through our system. Those dollars then equate to assessed value and roll through increases on the tax base, which is good information to share. And you can see it's a hefty number up there. Along the same lines, it's important to understand what we're doing and how much impact we're having on the community right now. Square feet constructed, as you can see, it's a new measure as well. We had some historical data we were able to go pull. But you can see we're still estimating about 5.5 million square feet of new development that's going to be approved through our Development Services Department, which is pretty impressive. There are a long list of items on here. I'm actually going to pass it over to Deidre for 1 second to talk about one, which is important to us and focuses on some of the MFR kind of takeaways that we had, and that's our integration dialogue around electronic plan review investment. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Deidre.
Thanks. So one of the biggest takeaways we learned when we 4 years ago sat in a small room with a lot of Post-it notes was how heavily we rely on our DTD development services customers to integrate our process for us. They come in with their permits, they're ready to submit, they have to walk through multiple workstations, explain their vision and their dream, to each different group, answer questions. And we just felt there had to be a better way to do this. And as part of Performance Clackamas, we began researching what that might look like. What we've found is that agencies across the region are moving to electronic plan review, and we wanted to know how we could join them in that effort. We felt that it would provide improved efficiencies for our customers, save them time and money. They'll be able to submit their plans and request an application from their home or office, and we wanted to get on board and hold ourselves accountable for how we could also join this effort that the region is going into. So we actually ended up adopting a department strategic goal. We said by 2021, electronic plan review will be available for customers who submit a commercial building permit application. And at that time, we will have a plan developed for expansion to other permit types as well. We're including WES and some other departments in this dialogue, so it really can be a holistic effort across the county to the extent we can. And so right now what you'll see in our budget is we have all of our land use and permitting programs have a placeholder for this effort. It is a big investment. It's something we are ready to take on. We've been saving some money within these groups to help us with it. And ultimately, we're estimating It should be under 1.8 million. We've included contingency in there, and that includes everything from the software, new equipment, facility modifications, contract services, any personnel we might need, as well as I said, that contingency. So we recognize it's a very big investment. You're going to see it in our capital outlay line because that's where we've essentially housed it for each one of those programs. And we wanted to make sure we've called it to your attention today.
That's me. Last but not least, emerging issues. Just briefly, in the interest of time, because we told you 30 minutes and now we're 35, I think. It's important to understand the fact there's still a dialogue around a funding gap on our transportation side. There is a scope of services that we are not able to still provide within the current framework of even the HB 2017 money. A lot of that's going to maintenance, which is needed. A particular concern is our capital money. Our local dedicated sources of capital money are drying up. A lot of the work that we have called out in our transportation system plan for future projects and our CIP plan are predicated on grants. So there isn't a lot of local control in that discussion. It's what project do you have that fits into what grant category? How do you make that work? Next, transportation maintenance facility. It was on our esteemed county administrator's list of goals. As many of you know, we have a facility down off Abernathy, 22 some acres, that happens to be located within the floodplain. There is short-term and long-term liability associated with that. So we are in the process of doing some sort of a feasibility assessment on the relocation of that facility now. Marijuana. Gotta love it. I know there is a policy level proposal coming forward, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We've been working collectively with other departments, but know that we have a role as it relates to services we provide our citizens. Most of those are in code enforcement, traffic safety, planning, and building codes. I do want to make a note because you raise it as a concern, as a dialogue in some of the committee meetings that we heard was our five-year funding trends. Know that we take a look at on all five, in some 10-year, we're looking at 10-year projections. For the most part, we're reasonably well. There are three that continue to kind of foster just some additional attention, one of which is dog services. Next, there's land use planning, and last but not least is obviously transportation and how those work. And we can get into more detail if you have any questions about that. I'm going to talk briefly about population. It is mind-blowing that we continue to see, and I've made that statement twice, about 300,000 development-related interactions a year. That number is continuing along, which is blowing our minds. We never thought it would continue, but we are still seeing trending in that along those lines. There are two that I didn't put up there that I'm going to take 2 seconds to talk about that are also important. One of which is the recycling costs. We have the discussion right now, and a lot of you have heard about China and their lack of interest in taking some recyclables. We're dealing with that through our sustainability and resource conservation department, and it impacts the work they are doing. Last but not least is the bidding climate, especially on our projects. We are seeing the market continues to be challenging because there are a lot of folks out there challenging on certain projects and certain bids. We are seeing our mid-level projects, we may not have any bidders for those whatsoever. So we're having to take a more strategic approach on how we put our projects out to bid, which we're talking about how do we group projects to get a larger project scope size to get that out to the marketplace. We're trying to be reactive to that. And that, my friends, ends the presentation for the Department of Transportation and Development. We would be happy and excited to answer any questions that you may have.
Good, because I think we probably have several. I mean, it's a pretty darn interesting department, right? So I'm going to start that off. I have a couple comments and questions. So in our books on page 22 and 23, talking about traffic safety programs, first of all, I noticed what I think is an incongruence in number of years when you're talking about Vision Zero, Clackamas County Zero Fatality Program. On page 22 at the top on result, it says by 2035, you'll reach Vision Zero. And on page 23 in the first bullet on the bottom of the page, it says traffic action plan, reduce it by 2030. So is it 2030 or 2035? Or is there a reason that there are two different years mentioned?
So that's a good question. So we are currently updating our Transportation Safety Action Plan. The old goal was to reduce it by 50% over 10 years. We are going to probably change that to reducing it to 0 by 2035. So I think this is a remnant of an old plan that's
Okay.
technically still in effect.
Okay, so 2035 is what you're aiming towards for Vision Zero.
Correct.
Great, good, thank you so much. Also, on page 23, in one of the bullets, you talk about preparing for the evolution of connected and autonomous vehicles, supporting, with a fiber optic communications network and new roadside infrastructure to support new technology. So can you talk a little bit more about that? And so, all of our roads are currently, pretty much all of our roads, other than Sunrise, are pretty much built out. They're there. And so how do you put in place these new systems that are going to take care of these vehicles that, oops, I'm out of a lane, or I'm going to park myself, or, whatever it is they do. It's all Greek to me.
Whatever it is they do.
That's it.
Part of the issue is we don't know yet what they're going to do.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
And we're not one of the test areas around the country, which is probably a good thing, but we're not.
Yeah.
And so let me back up and go a little more global. ODOT currently has I don't remember the exact title, but it's something like Autonomous Vehicle Task Force that was set up, I believe, in House Bill 2017, and the governor convened the task force. And they've just started meeting.
Mm-hmm.
There is a county representative on that who happens to be a county commissioner of another county, but I'm following that. All the presentations I've attended on this, and there are many, and Commissioner Fisher's asked me a lot of questions about this as well, is I've always said, as a local agency, what can we do? We have no idea what's coming. We follow the projects, the pilots around that are done on a large scale, but, we don't want to be behind. And there's a couple things that I was told, keep your technology current and have that fiber infrastructure. And in this county, thanks to our county-wide effort, we have a pretty good fiber backbone already. And most of our signals are already connected via fiber, and we're ready. It can go in new places as well, and we're constantly expanding it. So, whatever that future technology is, and if it needs to communicate with the rest of our system, we're going to be in decent shape to be able to adapt. The other part of that is our traffic signal infrastructure. We actually have a really nice updated system that we are constantly putting a lot of resources into. We just signed an agreement with ODOT where they're allowing us to put our stuff in their cabinets where their road intersects with ours, because our stuff is a little bit more complex than theirs, and we want it to be able to talk to the rest of ours.
Mm-hmm.
We have cameras. One day come and show you our traffic operations center. It's pretty impressive. So the answer is we're following it, we're staying in the conversation, we're staying updated. Right now, there's not much for us to do other than make sure we keep updating software and updating infrastructure and technology every time we touch a cabinet.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I have, just a minute, I need to write this down. And I have one question that kind of hasn't been brought up, but it's a curiosity question on my part, I guess. So if the county were to enact an increased vehicle registration fee, how could it be used, and would it be beneficial to the work that you need to do?
I'll start, you can add. We talked briefly about a discussion about the gaps that are still present.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those gaps kind of fall into one of three different categories. Most importantly is a dialogue around capital and those needs that are there.
Right.
And it's also a discussion about some of our urban local roads, because the packages that you see and the maintenance effort that you see we're pushing forward has a focus on our more highly traveled roadways.
Uh-huh.
Our urban locals are in pretty bad shape. And the dynamic around that discussion is that, you have folks who have a concern about, from a public perception opinion, some of the feedback we heard was, what are you going to do right in front of my house? In all honesty, with this 2017 money, we're not gonna do anything right in front of your house. We've got to push it towards the arterials. In addition to that, you know, the dialogue around the capital, we talked about it. Our biggest local funding source for guiding what our local values were around our urban renewal programs. We had local funding was there. That money is drying up. All of you won't hear that presentation, but we have one more major project in the Clackamas Town Center area that's going to expend a large number of those dollars, about $26 million that we're looking to improve kind of that corridor around the regional center. But there aren't a lot of options out there for local money. But the only one we have is SDCs, Transportation System Development Charges, and there's some limits on how you use those because they can only be a percentage. You have to match that money. So it's a challenge. Last but not least, we're faced with a lot of these ADA improvements. We have a new action plan around that and how we're going to do that. And that ADA upgrade is really having an impact on how we do our work and the cost of our work because now our paving packages have to consider a lot of that work when we do. If we do a simple overlay to a road, we have got to go out there. Theoretically, they become 2-year projects if they're a larger project because the first year you have to go out there, do all the ADA improvements. So roll all the curbs, roll all the curb ramps. Then the next year you're actually paving because you got to set the framework for the paving package ahead of time, which complicates some of our work. Do you want to expand on that?
Sure, though you did a pretty good job.
Hey, thanks. Taking the rest of the day off.
You guys are a
Left out a couple
good duo
important
up
things
there, huh?
that I'll add.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
As far as the capital stuff, just something to recall, we have a transportation system plan that is broken into 3 tiers, and Tier 1 is 15% of the whole because that's the only tier we projected we'd have enough money to do in 20 years. So that means 85% of our capital need is theoretically not funded in 20 years. So that's the capital need in a nutshell. And we recently checked our financial projections that we assumed 5 years ago when we did the TSP, and when you add it all up, it's pretty close to what we assumed. So we're so far on target with that. With the Dan's explanation of the urban locals was good. They just don't compete because they have very little traffic and they cost a bit of money because we're reconstructing most of them.
Right.
And they are in the worst condition of all our roads. The ADA, yeah, you know, ODOT settled a lawsuit last December. Portland is now settling a lawsuit that is hot off the presses. I don't know if we're going to get sued. We do have our transition plan that the board adopted last year, and we're actively replacing ramps, but it's not an item unique to Clackamas County. It's probably nationwide. I know for sure it's statewide, and so it's definitely a need where you never know. It's one lawsuit away from having to put a lot more money into it.
Okay, thank you very much. We have Commissioner Bernard, then Commissioner Humberston, Mr. Magdalene, Mr. Feely, and then Commissioner Savas. So, Mr. Bernard.
I thought a good example is that we didn't get anybody interested in the finishing up the Carver Bridge. So if you hear complaints about that, we still have gone out twice and still have not got anybody. Land use and permitting, I see we're actually down, and I know by 0.8 employees. So I know that with retirements and things going on, that's got to be a real challenge. Most of my stuff is comments. Drive to Zero, that used to be partially funded through court revenues. Still? Okay.
Yeah, it kind of goes.
Yeah, one of the things I negotiated a long time ago is that a percentage of it would go to pay for Patty's position, and she's retired now, and I look forward to meeting the new person. PQI versus PCI. PQI is actually better, right?
Different.
This is
Yeah.
engineer talk.
You're talking.
Great question. PQI was more of a comprehensive look at the condition of the pavement that also included the subsurface condition. It took a lot more work to get the data.
Yeah.
PCI, you look at it. What does it look like? Yep.
I guess because you can't compare it. Because I remember when I first got it, you guys showed me the thumper.
Yep.
Which basically tells you what's underneath. One thing I think we should look at in the future is fleet management come under your department. When I first got here, or maybe even as far back as 2003 when I was running to be here. I always wondered why fleet management was not under your department. Do you
We
want
are, it's funny you should bring that up.
It's funny I did. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
I know, it's amazing how you brought that up.
Insider.
We are having some retirements down there, and we are having a very coordinated dialogue with finance now. In fact, the employees, we've informed the employees down there. Historically, and you say take fleet over, historically, the maintenance component, the shop component of the fleet services was all encompassed under DTD. It was broken out at one point in time when they wanted to do a fleet services component. We are having discussions about reconsolidating those. And we can do that under, there aren't union issues because those folks used to be a part of ASME, which is great. There are all discussions about cost savings associated with that, and all looks to be positive. We do not want, to be open and transparent, we do not want to own the fleet rental, the agreements, all the paperwork behind it, and finance seems willing to kind of assume that role and responsibility continuously, so.
Okay. Just wanted to mention customer service, thanks to Dan and the work he's done. The button at the door is great. Even though we force people to push the button, I'm just kidding. I just want to say that twice, once in the elevator, a gentleman came in tears after going to your department. He was so happy. He went there.
One of two
When you
ways.
first said tears.
He said wish I had done this a long time ago. I've wasted a lot of time and money doing that. And then I did a barn application. I thought the process was interesting. I went through the whole thing, each little booth and stuff, and I thought it was really great. And then electronic plan review, we've been talking about it for years. I'm glad we're finally moving forward on that. And that's it.
Good, thank you, Commissioner Bernard. Commissioner Humberston?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Piggybacking on what Chair Bernard said, excellent public responses. I'm looking at the numbers you shared with us. 20% of your employees are new employees with less than 2 years. You expect another 63% to be able to retire and potentially retire within 5 years, which would mean that you would have 83% of your employees, assuming they all did retire, with less than 10 years, actually right on 8 years or less experience. Which leads to the question, are you doing a direct mentoring program using those people that are close to retirement to mentor the younger employees as they come in? More than just expecting them to kind of pick up things as they learn, but really direct mentoring.
Correct. I want to draw some attention to a couple of words. One is eligible for retirement. That doesn't necessarily mean they will retire.
Understand.
But our assumption is this trend will continue, and actually we have just kicked off an effort and a dialogue with Human Resources about a workforce planning discussion about how we develop more comprehensive information transfer through our various generations of our workforce. We are also, I'll be pleased to inform you, we are also as a part of that plan looking to see how we diversify our workforce. Because a lot of the work that we do is based on certifications and certain skills. So our dialogue as a part of that workforce plan development is to get engagement at a younger level. How do we get folks who are in high school interested in what the career opportunities are within DTD? With those folks, then they move into the certification process and move it forward. There's a lot of opportunity there, which we're excited about.
If I may expand on that also, just a few weeks ago at our senior staff meeting for transportation and development, our planning group gave a really interesting presentation on the onboarding work they have been doing with their new staff, because that's where so far we've seen a really big turnover in our land use planning group. And they have put together a really interesting program with some cross-training with existing staff, making sure that those skills are being transferred and questions are being answered, and that the new staff really are comfortable in understanding how those processes work. And we were talking about how to implement that through some of our other work groups as well.
And I want to expand on that one more time. The onboarding component also is important, not around the dialogue around the particular division. It's also a dialogue around the totality of the department. The greatest value that we have in our employees is having a very broad understanding of the scope of services that we provide. So that's the value in which you get to that institutional knowledge. I can't answer that question, which I'm okay with you answering that way, but you have to be able to inform them who they need to talk to and the questions they need to ask, which is also a part of that onboarding dialogue.
And one more thing to add, we actually had a new employee mixer with all of our new employees in this very room about a month ago, 2 months ago.
Speed dating.
There's so many of them that we had them all in a room from all the different divisions. There was like 50 people, and it was great. It was fantastic.
Good.
So, yeah,
I like that.
I'll probably do it again in 2 years.
Yeah.
And to Mike, you said that the state has come up with a number that, for the cost of the 205 expansion. Do you know what the number is?
$499.
What is it?
$499.
I have good information that it's $499.
Okay.
That's $1 million.
And 50 cents.
Yeah, yeah.
499 billion with a B, correct?
No, million.
Oh, million, okay. Well, that's a little better.
499 million.
That would be, yeah.
We'd be done.
Does that include the Abernethy Bridge?
Yes, yeah, it's the whole project, adding the third lane from Stafford to
500
99
million.
and the bridge.
And it's basically a 50-50 split, right?
it's
50%
about
for the
two-
bridge.
Yeah,
50% and
250 for the
50%
bridge and
yeah.
250 for the remainder.
Yep.
A lot of bridges.
And the second question related to that is, do you know if any of that is federal money?
That's the cost of it. It's not funded. And
It's
so,
unfunded.
you know, ODOT,
I'll rephrase the question. Do you know if there will be any federal money?
it is possible. The ODOT has an infra grant application in, which I couldn't tell you what infra stands for, but it's something with major freight routes. And I want to say it was a $50 million ask of Federal Highway and U.S. Department of Transportation. And actually, they're supposed to hear any day now on whether they got that. So other than that, there are no magic federal $499 million pots of money.
The 50 million is to continue the evaluation and
Yeah.
engineering.
Yeah.
I was there asking for that.
Wow.
If there is any federal funding,
Not for
more than just that
construction,
50 million, that actually goes to the construction, that
Not
I'd
for
be interested in knowing if and when that occurs. Because what I've seen is that we're not seeing the federal government step up like they used to for freeways and other infrastructure improvements. And really, the public needs to understand that the burden of these kinds of improvements are going to be on state and local governments.
Yeah.
And that the
Even-
days of
yeah.
expecting that federal money to come in and do these projects, which was wonderful, but those days are over.
No, there haven't been earmarks for a long time, and current programs, even the BUILD program, formerly Tiger, which pays for large infrastructure nationwide, is capped at $25 million per project. So if it's a $500 million project, there's no way there's no way to pay for it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Magdalene?
Thank you, thank you. Three questions, but one of them is, what % of dogs actually are vaccinated for rabies? Got a,
Well, 100% of licensed dogs are.
yeah, okay.
I know that for a fact.
Yeah. but-
I don't know, because they don't, I mean, if they don't get their dog vaccinated, we don't know about the dog. And so it's actually the code in Clackamas County that if you do get a vaccination, we get something in the mail saying, hey, this person just vaccinated their dog. That way we can actually go and check on the licensing. But we don't know compliance, but I would guess it's higher than the license rate, but maybe 50%. You know, there hasn't been a documented case of rabies in a dog in the state of Oregon, I don't believe, in like 40-something years. But it is still state law that every time a dog bites and breaks the skin, the dog needs to be quarantined for 10 days, and that must be reported to public health.
Is that a wag? I'm sorry, I just had to do that. Oh, yeah, that was.
Cujo was from Oregon.
Surprised you beat
St.
Don
Bernard.
Krupp, too.
Oh, yeah, he was
Yeah.
too far back from the mic.
Two other questions. That one has to do with the temporary radar speed feedback sign placements. How effective are they?
They're quite effective. And we're just
Pretty
purchasing
effective
2 more of them right now. And, you know, we rotate them throughout the county. We have a waiting list.
Long waiting list.
It's not as long as it used to be, but it's still about a year. Because we like to keep them up for a little while. What we find is, you know, the effectiveness wears away a little. They never become ineffective, but it's not as effective the longer it's up. But we have a couple permanent ones as well, but not as many.
So they can be rotated. What's the cost per sign? Just capital cost, and then I'm assuming that we own them, so we are responsible for rotating them
Correct. We
around.
do it with our own staff. We rotate them with maintenance staff, which is why we don't do a lot of them, because otherwise we'd be doing that all day. But
Jim,
just
do they
looking it
work
up,
for
my
you?
WAG would be about $8
What?
grand.
Radar?
Yeah, the signs.
I haven't got a ticket.
So those units roll about $12,000 apiece.
You know, it's where
12
they are.
apiece.
12,000.
And we have some older ones we've had to upgrade the technology in so they can communicate.
I have one for my chickens.
But, okay. And then a little more color to the
so
contracts.
random.
What's the minimum amount that what's the minimum project that the county can do themselves versus we have to put it out to bid? And a little better understanding of more of the difficulties you're having getting contract packages that somebody's willing to bid on because they're busy right now.
So state law for construction, you mean?
Yeah.
And as
And
opposed to, it's using our own forces, or do you mean just calling a contractor and saying, can you do this?
I guess I'm trying to figure out what the county can do
Yeah.
in-house versus what they have to
So,
put out for contract.
in-house, state law restricts us, I want to say it's $150,000, it might be 125, to do with our own forces, unless we do a pretty comprehensive report that shows we'll be cheaper than the private sector. And that report is very difficult to do, and you have to include a whole bunch of stuff. And Association of General Contractors right now is all over that provision in state law and is trying to make it stronger. Okay? But in addition, even if we had used our own forces, we would have to do a lot more hiring, right? Because in order to do that work, we'd have to not do other work. So right now, in Oregon, the law is pretty restrictive on what we can do ourselves. It's pretty minor stuff. You know, as far as contracting, if it's for construction, we need to bid anything really over $5,000. So it's basically everything.
Really?
Let's talk briefly about, the market and the climate that we're seeing. We're seeing projects that are under, I'd say, 1 to 1.5 million. You are having a hard time getting bidders on. And so, it's just the marketplace now. And you know what? We don't think the marketplace is going to get any easier because we don't see any change in the economic trend. And also, we think it may be getting more complicated with the infusion of this HB 2017 money coming down because it comes down to all the jurisdictions. Having said that, we see the market kind of equalizing, say, 3 to 5 years. The market will catch up and be able to respond. In the meantime, the dialogue that we're having, Mike and I are having with Joel Howie, who runs our capital construction program, and others, is a discussion about how we pool those projects. So how do we look more strategically and scheduling-wise for those projects that are in a general vicinity, that are viable to be bundled to get that total project cost up to a point where you start getting market interest in it. Carver Bridge is a great example. Carver Bridge, we went out, these guys did great work. They went out the first time, they didn't get bids on it. They actually talked directly with some of the contractors. We had commitments that they would be bidding, or ideas they would be bidding on the project when it went back out again. The outreach that was done was ridiculously broad. Because of the concern that we had and the desire we had to finish that project. Zero. We got one bid on the signal work up there, and it's a reasonable bid.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Yeah, we are tears of joy. But you're seeing that around the dollar value of the project. So again, we're hopeful that we can package a couple of these. The Carver work, we're trying to find an interim source, an interim opportunity with Clackamas River Water, a partnership there. We also are looking at the fact that we're paving Clackamas River Road, portions of it in the future. Next year, I think it was scheduled. So we're going to package a lot of that work together to get all of that out in the bid process alone, so it increases the size of that project.
It's the new normal.
Yep.
We're used to getting 7, 8 bidders on every project, and now if we get 2, we're lucky. And it isn't going to get better until the market figures out there's a lot of money to be made in Oregon and contractors start coming here. It'll happen.
And it's not just us. When you talk about the Vet Village project that we had the civil work done, we didn't get anything on that. And the one bid we got was pretty high, and we had to negotiate that down to get that dollar amount down. But it's just the marketplace.
The other thing I think is worth mentioning in conjunction with that is staff. ODOT's trying to hire 200 people right now. And so, yeah, and that's just ODOT. again, we can't spend all that money without people to manage things, and in some cases in road maintenance to do the actual work, which is why we're preemptively hiring now. And you saw the list of the roles we're looking to add. We don't want to get caught and be behind and have everyone else hire all the good people, and then we're stuck. So it's a major challenge right now. Finding a surveyor is next to impossible.
They're like a T-Rex. You see one? It's
We
like
were
a
lucky, we
dinosaur.
got one out of Medford and we snatched them up. So many other counties right now don't have licensed surveyors and they can't find one.
Wow. Mr. Feely?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question on your asset management software. Is there any way that other county departments, like facilities, might be able to use that, or is it
So
transportation
it-
specific?
Yeah, that's a good question. So just to be clear, we haven't bought a software package yet. We're just doing a
Okay.
strategic plan
All right.
to figure out what we want out of a software package. Odds are it won't work for facilities. And we've had a lot of conversations with them because they're looking into the same thing.
Right. We heard that
Facilities,
yesterday.
they have vertical assets. Roads, we have horizontal assets. And software packages don't mix the two at all.
Okay,
So one of us would be getting something that really doesn't
yeah,
turn.
all right.
Yeah.
It's worth asking.
Commissioner
I-
Chavez?
I did want to add dialogue on that. We could have some discussion. We are having a discussion with Water Environment Services about some possibility. They have asset software up there, and there could be a commingling of that. We also are having a dialogue, because there are other assets like street lighting districts, that it may be a viable alternative as well. I also want to go back one quick second about the E-plan discussion, about the dollars we're associating with that. We are also having discussions with other departments like WES. So when we get the system up and online, we're looking to defray some of our long-term costs by getting some cost recovery back when we expand it to Water Environment Services and to other agencies. Just I forgot all about that, and that just reminded me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to point out, I mean, we are living in a really exciting time with a lot of innovation, engineering, and new products coming out. And my earlier life in automotive innovation, engineering aspects, pilot projects funded by the federal government in transportation, started back in 1977 when I was going to school. I was actually had the awesome opportunity of being engaged with some of the manufacturers and some of these projects coming out, and realized that from when those things hit the news or hit the political world, even in emission control, often politicians and politics really ran awry or ran away with, oh, let's push something faster than the engineering actually supported it, or it was advised. And sometimes those actually prevailed, and you know, I would say mistakes were made, and to the consumers eating a lot of, or biting the bullet for a lot of those costs of failed systems. So I'm still in touch with some of that world, but unfortunately, we're not as in touch with as we used to be, because so much of that innovation work is being done overseas in Japan, for example, with Toyota and Korea actually as well, with some of the manufacturers. But what we do know here is that the engineering world is saying autonomous vehicles and so forth is really, their window is really practically 10 to 15 years away, where they feel that they can probably get there. If you listen to the political world and a lot of the trade magazines, it's like tomorrow. Yeah. And this has been prevalent. This is the history of my, 1977, I remember computers in cars were like, the first pilot project federally funded was 1977, or 77. And people said, no way, it's not going to happen. And it really was 1981 before it became really commonplace. But the experimental aspect of that actually happened years earlier, back in the 60s and actually in the 50s as these things move forward. So I just want to a word of caution is that until the industry is ready, until the insurance companies are there to say, we will back and support this, those are two things that need to come together. And it really based on a lot of these federally funded pilot projects where they will actually do testing, endurance testing of the products. They'll do failure rate analysis, and they'll actually market these things, and they'll actually fast track them through real life testing. And then you see some of these pilot projects in Arizona and others, they're gathering data. And I think that's the important aspect of that. And it's exciting, but the word of caution is that some of those things never make it to the marketplace. And we've always had to use some caution in that regard. But all to say that, we listen to like some of these futurists, when they predict what we ought to do, the planning world for autonomous vehicles is going to be a major game changer if that comes to fruition, because parking lots won't be needed, parking spaces won't be needed, ownership of cars probably won't even happen because, you'll just be transported. So it really changes planning, civil planning in a big, big way, and especially in urban areas. So, all to say, I think we just got to be a little bit cautious about not allowing politics to get ahead of itself as it has in the past. I did have one question or comment, and that is about the VRF, came up about the VRF, and that is the other thing that's out there, hanging out there, that we're kind of worried about as far as politics-wise and some of the regional aspects, and that is the regional bond. If we do a VRF, do we hurt or enable, or more so the aspect of if we did a VRF and the head of a regional bond, does regional bond forego that? So I think what we're talking about is the endurance, not the endurance, what's the word, the taxpayer.
Tolerance? Tolerance?
Yeah, there's another word for it, the fatigue, taxpayer fatigue. And that's a big issue as well. So I don't know if we will, how much traction that regional bond will see with our new Metro president. She has a grand vision of a grander regional bond than we ever first envisioned.
Right.
So all to say that we gotta stay in touch with our taxpayers to some degree and figure out what it is we want to accomplish versus what we would like to accomplish. And there's just only so much money out there.
Yep.
And what we need to accomplish.
Yeah.
I think that's the critical point.
On that topic, we're just out there having a general dialogue. You're going to see more of the discussion with C4. We're going to have it at the C4 retreat. There's going to be more of a global discussion about what that might look like, what the tolerance is, what the interest is. But keep in mind, we keep hearing dialogue around the region about, Washington County, and Washington County's got this, and Washington County's got that. They have more tools than we have to fund those kind of improvements. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We cannot get some of those tools because essentially through they had implemented fees and taxes that we no longer can implement. But the discussion is, if we want to be competitive in the environment, we want to have an expectation and see what your value structure is. Expectation of service delivery, what that service delivery is. If you want your local roads paved, if you want your neighborhoods to look like this, if you have a desire to improve capacity and through discussion about capital projects, then that's something we've got to frame and have a regional discussion about what that looks like. We think discussions we've been having internally, it's partnerships with the cities. How do we dialogue that in a more constructive manner? And how does that pool of funds work more collaboratively and strategically rather than just kind of parsing it out? And those are all discussions we're going to have and kind of move forward, obviously for board consideration and a dialogue and also throughout the region.
Commissioner Bernard, and then Commissioner Fisher.
Quick comment. One is that, one of the proposals is aerial photo of the entire county that the assessor is proposed to get for the assessor, which could be a valuable resource for you guys too. The other thing is that, when you look at 205, the federal government is probably now 80-20. I think they actually told us that while we were in their office. Obviously, we don't have the 80. The state doesn't have the 80. We're going to have something to throw towards 205, even though it's not our issue. It's a regional issue. We still have the Sunrise, which is the number one priority. It has been for decades. So having the VRF money is key to partnering with cities. One of my proposals is that we spend that money to partner with the cities to say, you're 40, you're 60, let's fix the roads in the cities that you pay part of, we pay part of, so we can and then we can turn them over to them. And I think that's a great way to eliminate some of the, finally, years ago, I got in trouble for saying this, so I'm gonna do it again.
Oh.
And that is, there are roads that we shouldn't be taking care of. You know, I went, in Eastern Oregon, they just ground them up, turn them back to gravel, because there's no reason to maintain roads that go nowhere. So at some point, we should be saying, you know, this road's not worth doing anything with, let's just shut it down.
That make him, Commissioner Fisher.
Question, I am aware of a pilot project in Portland where they are doing a surcharge on Uber and Lyft and then diverting that money into elderly and disabled transportation. Is that something that we could do in Clackamas County?
We could look into that. I'm not too familiar with it. I think Portland's got the definite advantage of density and the ability where that will add up probably to a amount of money that can actually do something, but we'll take a look at that.
Just curious if we had the ability to do that.
What we do have currently under HB 2017 is the new transit money, and part of that we're looking at and arguing for senior elderly transportation modes to help them. So new money, aside from what the county is currently doing, perhaps a jitney, local jitney shuttle, ADA stuff that's not necessarily for ADA, but actually helps the elderly move around as well.
On the transit discussion, we are knee-deep in the transit dialogue right now with the new HB 2017 money, and we spoke about it last week. There's going to be a presentation to the board here. I think it's the 11th, 12th, and we're going to ask, I mean, there's some dialogue around how we use that money and how we use it efficiently and effectively, because there is money that is coming. Keep in mind, you've got HB 2017 money going to TriMet. You got HB 2017 money going to all of our existing transit providers that are out there. Then you've got HB 2017 money that's coming to unincorporated Clackamas County that isn't within that service provision area. So how are we going to provide some level of service there? And that's also some complexity around that transit discussion. We're doing exercises right now. In fact, we have a workshop tomorrow to kind of dive in and get a more comprehensive analysis that includes our city representatives, discussion about what transit is, how does it work, how can it be better. And then we're also going for a TGM grant next year to have a discussion about how a connectivity discussion from our urban transit provision to our rural transit providers, how do we improve connectivity there? Because the dialogue is around, you know, end of stop. How do you make that connection? How do you give somebody a full scope of service to get from point A to point B?
And just so everybody is aware, the reason we haven't done anything with transit through the years is because it's not, we can't spend road fund on it. It's against the Oregon Constitution. And that's all we have. And so in DTD, we have not done transit ever. And so that's why we're doing this workshop. We're getting more into the conversation. The House bill changed the game a little bit. You know, currently the Mount Hood Express, there was some transit operations currently, and they're being done out of H3S, and we're partnering very, very closely with them. We've already been meeting, even last week, to start talking about the new money, what's this going to look like, how are we going to manage transit in Clackamas County. So it's right now in its infancy, but we're moving very fast because there's going to be money coming very soon.
Yeah, what we're trying to argue for regionally is, and I think 2017 has brought this to light, is that look at where we are as far as infrastructure in Clackamas County compared to the other counties. We're finding that we haven't been successful in winning a lot or building a lot of what the other counties have or the cities have. So what's brought to light is that inequity and the distribution of dollars, so we get our fair share. So arguing for our fair share is, when you're a regional body, you shouldn't be looking at formula distribution of dollars, because that's contrary to regional need, that's contrary to utility need. And we had a brilliant presentation from a firm at the last transit meeting a couple Fridays ago, and we're hoping to get someone like that. I guess we're hiring someone, I think that will help us with that, with our transit needs.
That is a future possibility that we are discussing.
But I think even for a presentation to the board or C4, bringing someone in that can actually explain the difference between what I call the economic needs of serving, where it's cost efficient versus coverage, and if you look at coverage, that's where we're really lacking. We don't really have the coverage in Clackamas County. We have it where it makes sense for TriMet to serve it, which is where the higher densities. If you always do that, then the areas that don't have the density or have topographical challenges or economic challenges never get served.
Never get
And that's where
served.
we are. And that's why we have, the boring came up out of this. Boring withdrew. And it just came up about a month ago. I said, well, remember, that boring got no service. You
Right.
had the employers
They were
paying, but they
paying.
had nothing. And so that is really bringing in some great conversations, some great points to light, is that in order, we need to be a stronger voice at the table, and we're starting to do that.
And, oh, go ahead.
At the C4 retreat, it's going to be transportation heavy, and a part of that dialogue is going to be around transit, just so you know.
And, and just also comparing county to county, Washington County doesn't operate any transit, even with all their resources, they don't. There's a couple shuttles that are run by others, but they don't run any transit.
Right.
That might change because of this new money as well, hard to say. And then what TriMet's doing is basically House Bill 2017 gave $46 million a year, I think, to TriMet. And it's given our rural providers here, I think, a total of $2 million for them to split a year. So it's not a heck of a lot. And then part of that TriMet pot, TriMet is going to invest in getting out of the small shuttle business within their district because they don't want to be operating them anymore. And so that's the discussions that we're having right now is what are those shuttles? Where can they go? How can we serve our county residents and, using some of this money coming from TriMet and putting it into buying a couple shuttles and picking a route?
And there are two questions that we're going to come in front of the board with, one of which is, do you want to be in the transit game, yes or no? Because you talk about the strategic dialogue about how if we don't apply for these dollars right now, it's going to be disseminated amongst smaller service providers. And the dialogue is around, do we do it more collectively and collaboratively and provide a balanced level of service? And if we don't act on that now or here relatively soon, that's opportunity lost. And so we'll cue that up here in the near future.
There's a grab for the dollars right now.
That also sounds like a topic that the Economic Development Commission should, or might perhaps, have a speaker on, since transportation is one of the issues that we're charged with this year. So transit is certainly coming under that. We haven't had any specific discussions about transit at this point in time.
Now's the
Just
time.
about roads, so, yeah, okay. Seeing no other questions or comments, we thank you very much for your